Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the panel of AI in medical imaging. My name is Darwin Ling. I'll be the moderator for this panel here. So today, I'm truly honored. To be honest with you, I think I'm had an opportunity to share the panel with a group of distinguished members from various industries, particularly from the radiology, pathology, ophthalmology, and these are industry leaders, entrepreneurs that have brought products to the marketplace, and practitioners, clinicians that are from the field that actually see firsthand how some of these products are being used and bringing values to the industries. So like I said, I'm truly excited. So we will start off with a live demos. And I think if you are on the receiving end of our newsletter, I have a teaser that says we'll have a live swallowing of the robot pills, but we will also have other live demos that include products from pathology, diagnostics, radiologists, imaging, anything that you can imagine that, what AI in medical imaging are for. And after that, we will have a short discussion. I mean, there were a couple questions that we have prepared where we want to look at some of the adoption challenges that are being faced right now in the industries. I think we've heard a lot of buzz about AI, particularly in the AI medical imaging. But what are the gaps that we're facing for any mainstream adoptions? And finally, we also look at what's next. What are the next set of challenges that we need to address? And we look at what we call the goalposts, what are the goals for the next frontier that we need to reach. So a little bit introduction for myself here. I am Darwin Ling. I'm the founder and general partner of Good AI Capital. So we are a venture fund, a VC fund focusing on AI startups, early stage AI startups in the area of fintech, healthcare, and B2B SaaS. So we have a name called Good AI. The good really stems from our investment thesis. We believe in doing good, doing well. And with that, we partner with entrepreneurs and technologists who are keen on using technologies, and in this case, it's AI, to address some of the most acute problems faced across industries. And for healthcare, we have three areas specifically that we're looking at. We're looking at synthetic biology, we look at precision medicine, and also ultimately the sort of like the supply chain manufacturing challenges that are faced in delivering some of the drugs to the marketplace or therapeutics to the marketplace here. And with that, I'm going to turn over to each panelist. I'd like to have them to have a quick introduction of themselves first, and tell us one thing that special about yourselves and why you think this is very important. And after that, we will launch in the demo phase of our panels. So let's start with Tori, and let's go from there. Tori?
Hi, folks. I'm Tori Smith, and my company, Endiotics, makes little pill robots that swim around inside your stomach. And what we think is really exciting about AI is that initially we're going to use AI to basically be like a self-driving aid, kind of like a Tesla. But over time, we expect AI to actually help us automate the robots, and they'll actually take on more and more functions that would traditionally be done by doctors. So we're very honored to be in this company because we're going to be looking to this community to help guide us.
Cool. And Carla, let's start with you next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Carla Leibowitz, MIT class of 02. My company is called Page, and we are building AI solutions for pathology. And it's interesting because pathology is at an intersection of a clinical practice, but also a key input to a lot of pharma product R&D decisions, so clinical trial endpoints, inclusion criteria, et cetera. And we believe that pathology can offer a huge benefit in the precision medicine world by uncovering new insights from tissue. Every cancer patient out there gets a biopsy. Very few of them actually worldwide get genomic sequencing. And so we're here to kind of unlock those insights and to help pathologists do their work. And it's a really exciting time for us.
Thank you, caller. John.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Exerio-Chilius, CEO and co-founder of Arterys. Arterys is a company in the medical imaging space that essentially is creating clinical solutions to solve specific problems all over the bodies. And so we have clinical solutions for primarily radiology, focusing on the cardiac space and the oncology space, and now more broadly in other areas like neurology and MSK. We've been kind of focused around trying to integrate AI in a way that is clinically usable, because I'll touch on this during my demo, but the way that AI is clinically integrated is really, really important, and it's really, really hard. And so we focus on that last mile to really integrate that AI into clinical solutions to make it truly useful and ultimately where there's some sort of impact to patients and providers.
Great. Let's go with David.
Thank you. So my name is David Peck. I'm Chief Scientific Officer for Sirona Medical. And we are also operating in the radiology space. And we're very excited by all of the technology developments that have happened over recent years. There's obviously a lot of great AI technology, and we're very interested in translating that into clinical practice. And in order to bring some of the AI technology to radiology, it really requires, as previously mentioned, integration into clinical workflows. And really what it comes down to at the end of the day is it's all about value. And the value is in terms of improving quality and improving efficiency. And so these are both sort of two sides of the coin that we look at, and we're very interested in the ways that this technology is able to improve value in this way.
Thanks, David. Michael?
Hi there, Michael Abramoff here, founder, executive chairman of Digital Diagnostics. Like John said, very focused on patient outcome, improving patient outcome, removing health disparities, lowering cost. We see autonomous AI as a tool. Autonomous AI means that the medical decision is made by the AI. There's no physician involvement of that medical decision. And that was a long road. I started 30 years ago in neuroscience. I'm still a practicing physician, but that really to be focused in addition on the algorithms, or not only on the ethics, but on the regulatory path. We were the first to get FDA approval for an autonomous AI in any field of medicine. And then really busy in reimbursement policy. And you asked for a fun fact, maybe not fun, but I love doing surgery. I love coding. But what I'm actually doing is policy, healthcare policy and healthcare payments, which, it's interesting in a different way.
Absolutely critical. I'm not surprised that you liked it. You call it fun, but that's actually absolutely critical work. Okay, so let's get into our demo. So Tori, I think all eyes are on you.
Awesome. All right. Well, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to be doing just a couple of slides on this concept, and then we'll get right to the Swallow demo here. All right, so Endiatx is to look within, understand, and fix the problems in the human body using microrobotics. And so let's just look in the stomach. Like if you have a belly ache, that could be just too much coffee, or it could be stomach cancer. But an endoscopy is actually pretty arduous. It takes a couple of visits typically before you get one, and then you get sedated. So it's kind of expensive and it's not a lot of fun. And the world of pill cameras as passive devices has never really replaced endoscopes. And so what we're trying to do is bridge that gap. PillBot is basically a little robot that swims around inside your stomach using 4 pump jets. We give the doctor a live video feed, let him control it over the internet. Basically, it's allowing a major endoscopy in the comfort of your own home or a refugee camp or low Earth orbit. You could even do it in a hospital. So basically what we're trying to do is, with this active motion, put the physician effectiveness of an endoscope into the patient experience of just swallowing a pill camera. And we should note that the Chinese are doing great work right now using magnetic technology, but that does require a trip to the hospital. So we don't just stop with a moving eyeball in the stomach, though. There's a $45 billion market to disrupt with that, but we immediately want to get into tissue sampling and microsurgery. Believe it or not, we even see these going into the human brain as like rice grain size surgeons one day. But I think we came here for another purpose. So let me go ahead and pop this over to another screen. And here we go. So you should be able to see me. This is grainy color, and we're working really hard to get much higher resolution in a month or two, but here's what we have. So let's head down my esophagus, and now Marcus is going to take over on the Xbox controller. And you should start to see some texture, some features. And Marcus is basically going to hunt around for something interesting.
Did you say Xbox controller?
Yeah, so right now we literally just use an Xbox controller to have a look around. And I've got, a typical patient would be maybe like two pints of water should inflate your stomach enough. The fun part here is you just skip breakfast and drink some water. You don't have to do a crazy prep. You don't have to, or what are those little white dots, I wonder? That's kind of scary. So we're trying to get
to eat for lunch.
We just want to make this kind of fun and easy for patients. Oh, hey, there's something over there. I wonder if we can find my pyloras. So this is a total R&D product. We're hoping to go to like HD color soon with high frame rates. And we actually see the ability for the robot to swim a circuit and create a three-dimensional holographic map. But basically, we're just trying to say, what do you do if you have a moving robotic platform capable of doing things inside the human body? I think this is the beginning of something really awesome. And as we start to wrap up my time here, and obviously I can share more footage all the time, our goal is basically to simply say thank you to the community for letting us share this R&D project that is very quickly headed towards the market. We're hoping to actually be selling this later this year, entering into our first IRB trials over the next few months. So at this point, I'd love to kind of open it up and let some other people start to make contributions.
Great. Thank you, Tori. I think this is your one of the seller for the particular panel.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing is, we could wait until we think it's perfect, but we're actually trying to get the word out now that, technology is really moving and opening up opportunities. And we want to inspire other people to sort of join us in this quest. So, let's see what the rest of the panel has to say.
Got it. Okay, cool. Caller, you next. You are muted, caller. Okay.
Great. So what you'll see is our first product, which is CE marked and got breakthrough designation from the FDA. So this operates in a web browser. And what you see here is an image of a pathology slide. These tend to be 2 by 5 centimeters, if I believe that's correct. And here's just a very, very thin slice of a biopsy. It's been stained for the pathologist to be able to review. And what a pathologist would usually do in this case is to put it under a microscope if they don't have a digital pathology set up, or even if they are digital, they would look at the whole slide, get a sense of where the tissue is, and they would zoom in to pretty good resolution. You'll start being able to see cells and structures here, and they will review every piece of that tissue. And I'll show here how you can make sure that you covered every piece of tissue. trying to look for very, very tiny findings that might really, really alter the course for that patient. If you think about cancer, IBD, a lot of these diseases, this is the critical decision for that patient. This is where you either find or you don't find that disease, or where you get some false positives as well. So today, this is how a pathologist works, and they'll review a slide at different levels of magnification and zoom in as they need to. And this is very time consuming. And there's fewer and fewer pathologists around to do this work. And there's more work to be done because more and more patients are being screened today. It's good that we can catch cancers early, but we have a huge difference between the demand for pathology services and the supply. And also, this is really hard. It's very, very hard to find every small finding in a slide. And so what our first product does, Paige Prostate, is to help guide the pathologist to find the cancer. So there's a couple of ways we show it. We can center on the area, and they'll be able to see some areas with the most likelihood of cancer on this slide. Or some of our new visualizations are that we just hide the pieces that the pathologist shouldn't focus on and make sure that they navigate on the areas of most interest. And this is true for prostate cancer. There's a few other pieces for a functionality for this product where we can even start differentiating between the different patterns cancers have. In this case, there's a lot of pattern 3, a little bit of pattern 4, which means a more aggressive cancer. And so the idea is that we're using computer vision to really help the pathologist not miss cancers and also spend less time going through benign slides. We've shown in some studies really amazing improvements in accuracy of pathologists and decrease of the time they spend doing this. And so this is our first product. As I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot of additional work to even detect patterns that pathologists can't see that relate to what drugs might work for a patient, what genomic mutations underlie that cancer, et cetera. So that's my demo.
Cool. Thank you, caller. That's great. Okay, so I guess next one will be John then.
All right. Can you guys see my screen? Perfect. So just wanted to show you a quick demo of some of the clinical applications that we have on our platform. And what I'm showing you here is our cardiac application, and we use AI in several different ways, primarily to automate a lot of the manual tasks required to actually work up a case. And as well as for kind of quality control and for extracting data that wouldn't normally be viewable. So this is a case where it's a cardiac MRI exam, and what the AI is doing in real time is assessing where the boundaries of the heart are, and contouring that. And doing it manually takes on the order of 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the complexity of the case. But what AI can do is automate that task. So in this case, we're showing stroke volume, ejection fractions for this particular patient, and all of this is able to be edited manually. So we have tools to, let's say that you don't like that, you can make any modification and bring it back. So and all the numbers updated in real time. So that's one example where AI, again, to try and identify landmarks, identify borders. I'll show you another quick demo here of 4D flow. So this is another use case that we have where it's primarily looking at flow inside the body, and we use AI, same sort of thing to identify landmarks, as well as identify and actually correct for flow abnormality. So this is kind of a full 3D view into the chest. and you can quantify blood flow and shunts and pressure gradients and so on. So that's one example in our for the lung. We also have examples that for pneumonia, which is actually quite relevant right now with COVID-19. So I think this case here, so this is a case where we're actually running this live in a few sites, actually in the UC system, where we're trying to identify patients that have pneumonia and trying to quantify the severity of that pneumonia. So in this case, this is looking for specific pathology in chest X-rays. So here I'm highlighting parenchymal opacity with a certain confidence, and then here gives you a sense where the AI has run and it gives you a sense of how much, whether there's a pneumonia and in which particular lobe. And you can see also a kind of a global view if I just change the contrast here. So this gives you kind of the folks at the front lines, ED, who aren't radiologists, a quick view to be able to help these patients, either discharge them or provide treatment. I also can give one last example. I think is a nice one in for the lung. Let me just quickly log in here. All right, so in this case, what we're doing is identifying lung nodules. So that's a really great use case for AI because it's quite tedious. So what you can do is same sort of thing. We're actually running kind of several AI models in tandem to be able to identify where the nodules are and track them over time. So in this case, this patient has several nodules, and I can click through each one and accept, reject, or even modify them. And what we do is push all of these results back into either the dictation systems, the RIS systems, or the electronic medical records, depending on the use case. So with that, I'll stop my sharing. Thank you.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So John, is this the one of the product that where you demo was the FDA approved one, or the?
Yeah, so everything I demoed was FDA approved except for the pneumonia detection on COVID. That one is still for research use only.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. So next one we have Michael.
So we don't have a live demo because of the Nexus system. We couldn't, right? So I have a short video that will be hopefully instructive. Let me see how you do that. Share sound. And then, so I'll run it now. Because what we do is so exciting, NBC actually came to us and created this segment. I won't show these beautiful images that the others showed, because what this is about is ease of use. It's an AI that's operated by a high school graduate, because you need to think where the patients are, where they need the services in primary care. And these people don't have experience with imaging the retina. This is for the retina. I will talk about why. And so you have high school graduates operating the AI, taking the image in a few minutes, interacting with the EHR, and making the diagnosis through the computer. So the computer makes a diagnosis. Again, it's made for ease of use to replace a highly cognitive task. Here you see me talking, to the NBC interviewer. Sorry about that. But the point is, it needs to be where the patient is. The patient, in this case with diabetes, and they're at risk for going blind from diabetic retinopathy, needs an exam, a diabetic eye exam, that normally a retina specialist like I do. So the patient needs to come to me, risk of COVID, I examine them, highly cognitive tasks like Carla also mentioned, but now that's being done by the computer, not where I am, but where the patient is in primary care. And so that's the difference. It's about ease of use, workflow, like John mentioned, fitting it into the existing medical system for better outcomes, removing health disparities, lower cost, etc. Focused on ease of use. Try to switch back here. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. So I think the next one will be David. I guess David will be I think we saw a lot of these product demos, and I think it would be great. David, you can talk about I think you're going to show a video or some PowerPoint. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've got a couple of slides.
Okay, all right then. I think it would be great to hear your perspective from a practitioner's point of view, how you actually integrate some of these technologies that you were using.
So at Sirona, we work with many radiologists, and we've done sort of a deep dive on just the experience of working with AI and what they're interested in. And so what I'll talk about in just a couple of slides here is basically for radiology AI, are we there yet? Have we really gotten there? So there's a fantastic paper. If for anyone who's in this attending here is probably interested in these sort of issues. So I highly suggest this Lancet Digital Health paper, just came out this month. And they looked at AI applications across all areas of medicine. And the numbers here, the graphics are beautiful, and the numbers are really fascinating. Turns out 58% of AI algorithms that have been, passed regulation are in the radiology space. So it really dominates, and there's many reasons for that. Mostly, the availability of image data and the sort of immediate ability to compute over it, but kind of an astonishing number. And that translates into 129 different devices that have been approved or cleared or granted by FDA, similar sort of numbers in Europe. And so, this is really amazing, right? A lot of products are out there and they're on the market, they're legally marketable. But very interestingly, a very prominent but unnamed executive made some comments that with regards to AI, if you're talking about machine learning and deep learning, so probably the thing that most of us think about when we talk about AI, especially in radiology, that it has very, very low utilization. So the question is, what's going on, with so many on the market, so many legally marketable, why hasn't it gotten there yet? And so I'll talk very briefly about what I think it takes to get there and what a lot of our radiologists have given feedback around. So the first one is that understanding the clinical context is just super important, and it's just so complicated and complex. And it turns out that basically a chest x-ray is not a chest x-ray is not a chest x-ray. If you're looking at a chest x-ray, it depends what you're going to talk about in that report. Depends on if you're suspecting pneumonia or if somebody's been in a motor vehicle accident. Very different types of reports, very different content. And what that really means is that reports are not some sort of absolute listing of truth of what's in an image. And so understanding that is very, very challenging. There's really not yet been what I would consider a very integrated experience. How does it really work within their workflow? And how do you get results in front of an expert, a radiologist, but without getting in their way? It's a super, super difficult task. And again, one that I think has yet to be fully solved. And then finally, value. And I believe we'll talk a little bit about this afterwards in some of the discussion, but value-based healthcare, incredibly important these days. It's tempting to try and simplify that just in terms of accuracy, F1 scores, AUCs, that sort of thing, and maybe efficiency, and think that that's the entire game. But it's really not. And again, in the clinical practice of radiology, things like quality assurance, they look at other things other than just simple accuracy. They want to know, did the radiologist answer the clinical question? Did they really do their job and provide value? And then finally, and the really, the thing that everybody wants, but is so difficult, is outcomes. How can we measure outcomes? Incredibly difficult. And so what makes this so hard? This is just a textbook image that I'm using to demonstrate what we call the federated radiology IT stack. This is pretty typical of a department of radiology or a practice of radiology, that they've got many different information technology systems that have to talk to each other in some way, but literally they are just cobbled together. They talk to each other, but in minimal sort of ways. And imagine the experience of being a radiologist where you have to, on a daily basis, work with 4, 5, 6 different IT systems with very different designs, very different data models, and constantly juggle between them. So what makes this hard? The question is, where is the clinical context here? It really isn't in any one of these systems. Is this an integrated experience, or is this just merely an interwoven experience? That's a really difficult one. And then finally, value, outcomes, the thing that we all want. Where is that in this diagram? It doesn't exist because it is very, very difficult to get at. So this is my last slide here. So finally, just going back a few years, in 2014, there were predictions in this industry that the PAC system, in other words, the picture archiving system that did all the communication and storage and viewing of the images, the prediction was it's going to break down. We're going to break it down into a vendor neutral archive. So just, big disk plus a zero footprint viewer and a couple of other parts. And by breaking it up into these different components, you would get best of breed. And so this idea of best of breed kind of took hold, and everyone was kind of waiting for this to happen. But a couple of years later, it turns out it really didn't happen. A couple of interesting business reasons to talk about here, but we'll not concentrate on that too much. The main problem was the interoperability didn't quite get there. When you chop something up into parts and then try and glue it back together, you run into more interoperability problems. So this is PAC. So why am I talking about this? We're here to talk about AI. So nowadays, just a few years later, less than 2 years later, people are talking about, is AI going to deconstruct? Is AI going to be a monolithic thing, or is there going to be, and interesting that others have used this very similar terminology, a vendor neutral AI platform and a bunch of models? And I think that there's a lot of value in it, but it all depends on how it's done. And so finally, the question is, are we going to deliver as an industry? Are we going to deliver yet another federated collection of software where you have to bolt it all together and you get very disparate experiences with it? Or is it going to be an integrated user experience? Does someone hand you the keys and you take the car for a spin? So I think that's one of the key questions for this industry overall.
Great point.
Thank you. Thank you. So then I promise you guys a treat. I mean, basically we see some of the most futuristic, or in the future, what kind of medical imaging technology can come in the future. And we strategically have this order that we actually have different demo for different products, even in different fields here. But we kind of come to the futuristic all the way back to what's reality, what's the current challenges now. So I think I learned quite a bit. So just by looking at the demos, and really very interesting to me. So I guess with that, I think that's really a good setup. Say again, we talk about sort of the what's in the future, what's happening now, and what are the current challenges of the industry. So I want to kind of switch our focus a little bit and talk about products. And I think, I'd like to direct the following questions to John and Michael. So you guys both deliver FDA-approved products to the marketplace. Congratulations, that's really a big step here. So the question now is that, what do you see as the challenges just to get to that? I think, right now, of course, we talk about mainstream adoption. But but before that, how do you, based on your experiences, what led you to this, and what are the challenges, and how do you overcome this? I think that would be a great kind of like segue into the next questions here. So, and all other panelists, I think you obviously have great insights as well. Feel free to chime in after John and Michael. So, so John, Michael.
It's okay to show a slide.
Yeah.
That helps me as a framework. Is that okay?
Okay. Okay, sure.
So I like to use this slide a lot. I hope you can see it.
Okay.
Everyone seeing it, or I'm not sure what you see. Is it full screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, John, I will let you speak, but it was just, it was such an interesting path, because on the left you see, well, you have this AI algorithm and you want to bring it to patients. Well, it ends with reimbursement. That is really crucial, and a valid business model for an AI company, so you can investors to actually want to start with you. And so surprisingly, it started with ethics, because if you don't work this out with the entire healthcare system, physicians and patients and regulators will not want it, and they will reject it, and they will say, this is like gene therapy, this is like Theranos, stop right here. So a lot of work was done on AI ethics. Then you go to FDA and they say, no way is a computer making a diagnosis. And it takes 8 years to circumvent that. And then once you have FDA approval, or de novo authorization, as formally have to call it, you still are, with an existing experience that doctors have, where they have preferred practice patterns and standards of care that do not support AI at all. So you need to change that. For example, a patient organization like the American Diabetes Association actually had to support AI. So people will say, hey, it's in the standard of care, I can actually use it now. That leads to quality measures. I won't even go there. HEDIS, MIPS, you probably have heard about it. That's really a challenge. Then you go into CMS and payers, and you really need to support from physician organizations like AMA and American Academy of Ophthalmology in our case, or the American, the dermatologists in our next product. And otherwise you will not get a CPT code and you will not get CMS reimbursement, because again, they look at the entire healthcare system. And only when that happens, which was actually a few weeks ago, where CMS for the first time ever decided to pay and cover an autonomous AI, meaning a computer making a diagnosis, only then can you really expand rapidly. I mean, we have been putting it in many places, the leading institutions in the US, in 17 countries around the world, but still the real adoption comes when you have a very clear reimbursement. And so that has now happened. So I just wanted to say it's not one hurdle, it's many hurdles. They can be overcome. I think that's why I wanted to bring this up. It can be overcome.
Yeah, and
Back to you.
If you keep the slide here, actually.
Sorry. Okay.
Great. Kind of as a lead in from my comment was, what you're showing here is kind of you're dead on in terms of what needs to happen. In terms of our path, so this looks quite waterfall. In terms of our path, it's almost like several parallel paths, because in this diagram, you have to make sure your AI algorithm, is there's a product market fit for that, and you're solving, and you have to make assumptions on what that market is, and if you make the wrong assumption halfway through, it's going to be quite costly. So in our case, even before that AI algorithm, before we even got there, maybe I'll draw a few more dots of understanding what is the pain point, what is that clinical unmet need, and then translating that to what is the value proposition of the algorithm or the product, and then from there translating that to a product requirement, and then translating that to an AI algorithm. So there's like 6 steps even before that, before you get to that model. I think that is critically missing in the industry, is the work up front to understand, is there a pull as opposed to a push from the AI vendor? And then of course, all the steps you outlined. So the other thing that I'd add to this is adoption. So yes, reimbursement can help move adoption, but especially with AI, especially how you take these great technological solutions, and if you need to change practice, you need behavioral change. And that's not represented in here. It's like, how do you do that? So for example, in the case of our X-ray algorithm, like we're trying to help frontline physicians and nurses make decisions. If they don't interact with the screen, there is no way that you can't page them like the answer. They need some kind of digital medium. And if they're covered in blood and going on to the next patients, like you have to change something completely around. So that is really challenging, is how do you integrate AI in a way that's seamless? For the radiologist, it's easy, because as David mentioned, they're already in that cockpit. But anybody outside of that cockpit, it's a much more difficult challenge of trying to do that.
And you make great points. For me, it was easier starting with this one, because as a retina specialist, I was already doing this, and I realized the need, because there's not enough of us. We're not good enough. This is better than me or any retina specialist. But I want to bring up something else. You make great point. I think it's actually a circle, because if you ask CMS, are you going to reimburse that? They actually look at utilization. So you need adoption and utilization to get reimbursement, but you need reimbursement to get utilization. It's the same at, almost the same at FDA, where your first customer is really FDA. I have to say, I mean, we can disagree, but that was how I saw it. So you really fit it to get this thing through FDA and make it fit what they expect. And then you get indeed into the broader market fit. And so then you have suddenly a lot of customers that may differ from what the FDA wants. So yeah, you bring up great, I absolutely fully agree.
Yeah, I'll add in there that that's a really interesting comment, because since we have breakthrough designation, we have a lot of conversations with the FDA. They've never cleared anything like our device before. And what we hear from the market, what the market wants to see as far as claims is concerned, is not really what the FDA was concerned about. So you need to balance those two things as you design your clinical studies so that you kind of hit both, which makes things extra fun and challenging. But it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think on the issue around quality, this is one of the areas that particularly jumps out for me. It's really interesting. A lot of people have written within the radiology community about radiology often being seen as just merely a cost center. So, it's just money being spent, and we just need to reduce that amount of money being spent without consideration of the true quality and the contribution to care done on the diagnostic side. I think it's kind of interesting. I'm certainly not an expert in other medical specialties, but I suspect that there's some differences amongst the different specialties. And in radiology and perhaps pathology too, I don't know, maybe Carla can chime in on this. Because the diagnostic side is generally pretty separated from the therapeutic decision-making, it makes the measurement of these quality measures just very, very difficult. And I like this one analogy that has been used, being a baseball fan myself. It's kind of like looking at a baseball pitcher and saying, how good is that pitcher? How many balls and strikes do they throw? But it turns out it's a lot more complicated than that, because what about the other 8 guys behind the pitcher, right? They all contribute to the overall outcome. And so the analogy here is that the diagnostician is kind of like the pitcher, and all the other players on the field are kind of like the referring physicians who are making a lot of decision-making around the treatment of the patient. And so the question is, how do you disentangle those two? It's very, very difficult. And again, this kind of comes to this whole issue that I have with outcomes, that of course we want to measure outcomes, but it's super complicated and it's just so hard to disentangle the two.
It is really hard. And I think you see this in pathology more than radiology, where if you're at a cancer center, yes, they have tumor panels where everybody gets together and discusses the patient. But if your biopsy is done at a lab, then what the ordering physician sees is a report. They might not even see, they never see the glass slide. They might see a digital image if that lab has gone digital, but there's a lot of throwing things over the wall. And so studying outcomes is something that you have to do really carefully, and it's very time consuming. You have to, in many cases, do it prospectively. If you want to do health economics research, which is really needed outside of the US to get reimbursement. I think Michael and John talked a bit about CMS, but in other countries, it's a very different game. You have to be in it for the long run, and it takes years to do some of these studies.
Yeah, especially for chronic diseases, right? But
yeah, absolutely.
One thing that I agree with you, David. What my challenge is more that many AIs, or like 99% of AI studies compared to physicians, where these physicians have never been validated, they have their own, they have inter-observer variability. I do, and everyone else does. And so what is nice about the outcome in some way, or prognostic standard, whatever you want to call it, is that it's at least more standardized and more validated than some bunch of random physicians. And I agree with you. You really need to incorporate the workflow and everything else, the entire context into it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like on the radiology side, again, I can only really speak to that area, but because of this difficulty, really all of the quality measures are just process measures. And the favorite one is turnaround time. So radiologists, when people are looking at quality, are often just rated in terms of, are they getting the report out quickly enough? Not what's the content of the report, were they correct? What was the outcome for the patient? Was the clinical question being answered? And so that's unfortunate. And I would love to see that changed.
You talk about process. I was having a meeting with one of the biggest payers this morning about reimbursement. And, we talked about process integrity, meaning what I like about AI is that if you're a payer, you know exactly what you get because it's FDA approved, it's validated, the performance. It's not like a doctor where you throw a CPT code and hope they do the right thing. You know exactly what you're getting for that CPT code or whatever, billing code there is, depending on, the contracts and whether it's value-based, et cetera. But you have something called, process integrity that you don't have when you drop it off to a physician.
So let me just interject here a little bit. I think you guys already touched upon outcomes. I think that's one of what I mentioned earlier is the goalposts at the end, I mean, it's not your AI algorithms. I mean, those are good technology to have, but if you're not delivering values, so your products are not going to be successful ultimately. And so the next question, I think, a good lead in from that context is that, so what exactly are the outcomes or some of the metrics that we should be using to measure the successful product, right? So I think we kind of touched upon that a little bit already, but perhaps maybe for the next set of questions, Colin and Tori, you can actually chime in a little bit, because I think with your background, you have worked with customers quite a bit. Ultimately, you need to make a sale, make that pitch. Then I think you have a lot of kind of moving parts. And I think want to see where you structure your discussion when you talk to the different stakeholders. And I think that will give the audiences sort of a sense of, that what those metrics or the, goalposts that we're looking at. And again, like before, other panelists, feel free to chime in. I think we already see that, great sort of discussion that are going on already. So Carla and Tori.
Yeah, to jump in, I think initially at the start of our company, our critical stakeholders were investors. And, when we bring up the concept of what happened with Theranos, from the very beginning with Endiatx, we felt like that gave us license to just be radically transparent. So we raised our first funding round when, we essentially had a burrito-sized pool robot. But we were honest about our vision, and we were honest.
How do you swallow that? I hope you don't swallow that.
Well, the fun thing is that the gentleman who let us use his swimming pool to test Poolbot, about 9 months later, after getting our regular monthly updates, finally came in as an angel investor. So our goal with doctors is very simple. We want to say, what do we need to build for you that would actually let you put aside an endoscope? And until it's that good, this is pure R&D. We never ever want to try to push something through that's just not quite there, because we really want to do something beautiful here. And if we can unite all the stakeholders, then that becomes possible. Carla, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in our case, we're delivering software to hospitals and to labs. And so I think David's slide was right on when it comes to, like, it's not just that someone just opens a browser and your software will work, right? You have to interoperate with so many different systems in the hospital, and every hospital has a different setup. And every lab a lot of labs actually have homegrown software solutions. And so your product can be really great. Your workflow can be very intuitive, but you need to address more stakeholders than just that user. You have to work with IT, you have to work with the data privacy and security officer, et cetera. When it comes to convincing that user who's going to be your champion, that's going to bring your technology into that institution, there's nothing like allowing them to get their hands on it and try it for themselves and see the value of it. So we've done a few studies that we've published where we really helped pathologists find small cancers that they missed, and there's no alternative for that. So it's a mix of really pleasing your end user, the person that's going to work on it every day, but also addressing the concerns of all the other stakeholders that are going to be interacting with your system or making decisions about the adoption of your system.
Sure. Peter Diamandis is challenging all the startup founders. He says, if you want to disrupt, you've got to be 10 times better, 10 times cheaper, demonetized, dematerialized, right? And in our industry, that's a big challenge, but we take it to heart. And so we started thinking like, okay, what does it ultimately cost for a patient to get an endoscopy if they get it on the third visit? If we could do this at home, like Medtronic is pioneering with PillCam, we could save multiple trips to the hospital. We could save sedation. And then it starts to become exciting. There's amazing magnetic capsule technology coming out of China right now, but that requires you to go sit in a large piece of capital equipment. And we're just thinking, hey, you know, could we do that in your living room? So these are the kind of things we're trying to push for. But we're going to need a lot of guidance along the way, right? To make a secure, HIPAA compliant, cloud-based control platform. You know, that's not a trivial task.
There's a good question on the chat around how do we explain or make sure that our AI works. And that's really hard. I think there's multiple ways to do it. In our case, we've taken data from hundreds of institutions to show that the algorithms work. Not everyone has that luxury. So sometimes you'll take data from 5 to 10 physicians and see what their variability is on a difficult data set and see how well your system does on it. And I know John can talk a lot about this because Ardoris has a lot of products out there. But you really need to do the homework to be comfortable that your products are not going to hurt patients, right? And then you share that data with the skeptics or the people that are excited about it but are just not so sure.
I love working with FDA, which is kind of funny because some people outside of our industry often say, oh no, you know, what's it like working with all that regulation? But, you know, in 14 years of designing med devices, all FDA has ever asked of me was two things. Tori, is your device safe and is it effective? And if you come up with a therapy or a drug or a device that is safe and effective and moves the standard of care forward, you know, the whole community is there to help you do it.
I couldn't agree more, Tori. We are in several countries where the FDA approval made all the difference because it's such a high standard to meet.
You know, I have a question maybe for the panel, if I can try and just ask something regarding this. So, you know, when we think about value, the people who do health research and policy sort of work tend to describe things in terms of cost per quality adjusted life year. And they often have thresholds somewhere in the range of like $50,000 to $100,000 per quality adjusted life year. If you can do better than that, then, you know, it's a good policy to use that. But the interesting part to me is the quality adjusted life year, right? So on the one hand, you have quality, and then on the other hand, you have life years. And, you know, just looking at this panel, I think we're looking at a quite broad spectrum of diseases, some being very chronic, some being very acute. I'm at the moment a little bit more focused on the more acute areas where the quality adjustment is probably the more dominant factor. But I think that there's a lot of oncological and similar type of applications where it's more the life years. And so I'm just kind of curious what the thoughts are in terms of the measurement of quality or life years and how that affects things, especially in terms of timetables, how long it takes to try and measure any sort of life expectancy differences.
Maybe I can jump in. For us, it was all about focusing on specific applications where we can prove something in a short amount of time. So there's been, for example, in the cardiac imaging space, a way to show that if you can assess ventricular function changes based on therapy, like you would only have to wait 6 months before you can see true outcomes. So like in that case, you know, automating certain measurements, you know, in that space is, you know, you can show traction in a small amount of time, let's say. But for us, that's even too long, because if you're, and that's why we're focusing on even easier type problems where we leverage AI to accelerate, so focus more on the efficiency side and more on the throughput side and less on the quality adjusted life years, which should be done. But the problem is that it takes years. And so you need to have years of runway and to even try to do these large studies. Like Michael's in it. Michael's been in it for years and just been laser focused on that. And you either start there, or in our case, it's more of a platform play and focus on partners who are doing these longer term studies. So it kind of depends on what vertical you're focusing on. It's either technology side or on the clinical side.
Yeah, and to add to that, there's a big component too that is about kind of the efficiency that you might allow a practice to gain, right? So needle and haystack type applications, so finding lesions in lung CT scans, or in our case, prostate biopsies, one of the things I didn't say is that a prostate biopsy isn't one of those slides I showed. It's usually 12, right? So if we can help that pathologist find, come to the right conclusion faster, that's worth a lot of money to the lab. That's worth a lot of time to that pathologist. And so there's ROI in it for the hospitals as well. And that's not necessarily something the FDA might care too much about, but it is a real part of the value that these products can offer to practices.
And echoing that, the FDA is really interested that it gets adopted, right? They don't want to approve things that actually are not used and do not benefit patients. And so they still ask us how's going. We have very frequent contact, like every week, with the FDA about where it's going. So it's, you know, the business model needs to work, obviously, but FDA is very engaged in that.
I guess one final thing is we wanted to keep our demo pretty short, let other people speak. But I actually had Marcus driving Pillbot and me for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So we can make that raw video available later if people want it.
Nice. All right. So I think we are approaching the end of the panel. So I think what I like to summarize, I think, is something that I take away is actually very resonate with how we invest. So we actually don't have a portfolio company in the AI in medical imaging. We focus on synthetic biology, genomic sequencing. We talk about gene therapies. Those are like the key areas that we focus on. And AI plays a large role because, you know, at the end of the day, it's data driven. But oftentimes when a lot of these companies come to us, they kind of say, look, you know, we have this cool AI algorithms, you know, we are trying to find that particular sequence so that we can, you know, I think the most popular response right now, let's, you know, find that COVID relief right now. So one thing that I always, and my partner, we kind of just always look at, kind of say, what is your product? Well, we kind of use the, you know, the software IT kind of, you know, terminology. What is your product market fit? And by that meaning, what disease are you treating? What biomarkers are you looking for? Where is that application? Despite that, they say, oh yeah, we are like just, you know, a computational platform, and so we can apply to anything. That usually doesn't gel well with what we do because we care about, you know, exactly, again, is the product market fit. How are you addressing the problem? How do you solve the problem? How are you different? And the fact that you have just AI algorithms, what is your competitive advantage? The competitive advantage can come from, say, you already have you know, approval from FDA, or maybe you have personal, you know, private data or proprietary data that nobody else in the world are having, only you. And why do you have that? So these are the key questions that we usually ask them. And ultimately, you know, we will focus on, are they actually solving a, you know, a valid problems, and are there customers that are willing to pay for the solution? The customer could be a pharmaceutical company, could be, you know, medical device company, but at the end is, or maybe the end user, which is your kind of like the whole idea of, you know, your patients, right? And as we discussed, you know, there are many stakeholders. Anybody, you need to deliver value to everybody. You can just like, you know, yeah, I cure cancer and that was it. So as we learned today, there are many, many challenges that you need to overcome. So I personally learned a great deal. And, you know, I really enjoy the panel, and I want to thank everybody here on the panel. So I guess, you know, do we have more questions from the panel that we want to address? I think we still have about 2 minutes left. Okay. So looks like, you know, we can still stay along here. So if you need to drop off, feel free. But I guess some of the, you know, audience can still remain. And if there's some burning questions for the panelists or us, you know, me, you know, feel free to hang in there. And then, you know, I think, thank you very much.
Yeah, and on behalf of the MIT Club of Northern California, I wanted to thank all the panelists for joining, and just let everyone know that there are breakout rooms that you can go to and see other attendees directly. We'll, as long as the panelists want